so smart. In the middle of the shir, they get their comments.
Shh. This is not a lecture. Remember that.
I
It's
agree.
not a lecture. We're learning together. If it was a lecture, I'd be the only one with the copies, and you just believe me and trust me. No, we learn this together. You can all see it, and you can all question, and you can ask, and you can challenge. That's the nature of the shir.
Scenic route.
It's all about the gold rush in Australia.
And that can be challenged too.
Yeah. Clearly.
Everything,
Clearly,
history
everything-
can be
everything's
challenged.
fair
Anything,
game.
exactly. Nothing is off. You know, you don't have to accept anything.
From Vienna to Australia.
That's, okay. So in this week's parsha, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu stands in front of Paroi and last words to Paroi. Right, it was after Paroi. It was after the Makkah of Choshech. Paroi says, "You know what? I'll let you go partially. I want your animals to remain." And Moshe says, "Fakert. Not only we're going to go completely, we're going to take all your animals too." And Paroi said, "You see me again, you're going to die." And Moshe said, "Good gesagt, taka azai." And at that point, Moshe Rabbeinu warns Paroi of the coming Makkah, Makkah's Becheres. And Moshe tells him there's going to be a tzaka g'dayla, a mighty cry throughout the land of Egypt like there never was. And he says, and he says this pasuk, Ulechol b'nei Yisrael lo yechratz kelev l'shoinoi, that to all b'nei Yisrael, towards the Jews, the dogs will not bark. Rashi says yechratz means to sharpen the tongue. L'cher means to bark, to yell out a yelp. And towards the Yidden, no dog will scream. So the pasuk is actually a prophecy Moshe was telling to Paroi, and we assume that that's what happened. That the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Yidden were actually locked up in their homes the whole night. Even though when midnight came and the firstborns all fell, Paroi came out and gave reshus. He said, "Yeah, you guys can go." The Yidden didn't leave because Hashem had told Moshe earlier the Jews have to stay indoors the entire night. It's not safe. Once the destroyer has permission to destroy, then even those that don't deserve, even the righteous can be punished as well. Stay indoors until dawn. Stay at home till dawn. So although we had permission to go, we were technically bound until dawn, and then we left by daytime. But the truth is the freedom already began by night. That's when Paroi told us to leave. It was the Eibusha that said stay indoors till morning, but the bondage was completely over. And that's why there's a big debate in Gemara. When really was the redemption? At night when Paroi said we could leave, or only by day when we actually left? The difference is during the day when we daven, we say go al Yisrael and then go straight to Shemona Esrei. You want to be soymech gulu l'tfilah. You want to juxtapose redemption to Shemona Esrei by day, because we were redeemed by day. At night, there's a debate in Brachas how important it is. In fact, after Gal Yisrael at night, we say Hashkivenu, we say Kaddish, we interrupt between, we don't really juxtapose the redemption, the Geula, and Shemona Esrei at Ma'ariv, because redemption didn't really happen at night, it was potential redemption. And the Gemara, there's a number of debates. Do you have to even mention Yetzias Mitzrayim at night? Do you have to say Parshas Vayomer at Kriyishma at night? That was also a discussion in Gemara. All of these discussions depend on the fact that the real redemption happened by day. In fact, a clear halacha. You walk into shul and you see the minions already in the middle of davening. So by Shachris, you walk in and the Chazan is about to do Shemona Esrei. Nobody would say do Shemona Esrei and then afterwards catch up, because you won't juxtapose Goal Yisrael to Shemona Esrei. But by night, the halacha is if you walk into a shul by Ma'ariv and they're about to do Shemona Esrei, you're supposed to actually, it's clear in Shulchan Aruch, you do Shemona Esrei, and then afterwards you do V'hu Rachum and you say, you won't get Geula next to Tefillah. It's not so important at night because we actually weren't redeemed at night. It happens to be Al Pi Kabbalah, we don't do it at night either. In Lubavitch, we follow the Kabbalists, the Kaf HaChaim, the Sephardic Rav. He says, Al Pi Kabbalah, even at night, you shouldn't switch around the davening, and therefore, even if the minyan's about to do Shemona Esrei, you came late, this is what it is, you start Ma'ariv Haravim. But in strict halacha, you would flip it, because it's not so important that you won't get geula before tefillah because we actually weren't redeemed that night. It was only potential. Anyway, that's just nothing to do with anything. But as Moshe Rabbeinu is foretelling Pari what's going to be, he tells him, "Ulachol b'nei, you should know that the dogs aren't going to bark when we leave." Now, whose dogs? The Jewish dogs, the Goyish dogs? Does it mean they won't bark at us or they won't bark at all? I think as kids learn the pasuk, we learn it in school. It sounds like no dogs b'chlal in Egypt were barking. But jump to number 3 for a second to comment from Rabbeinu Bechaya. He writes, "V'im kain yagid l'cho akasuv," in number 3, just in number 3, the pasuk when Moshe tells Paroi that the dogs won't bark towards the Jews, the pasuk is telling you koyach hanes hagol, the big miracle. Ki oisa shah, at that time, which was midnight, by the time of Makas B'chayres, the kelev was chayres l'shoyn al mitzrim. The dogs were barking towards the Egyptians, but lo yahaya chayres l'chol b'nei Yisrael. I mean, the same dog was barking at the Egyptian, would look at the Jew, would be silent. It was almost like the makkah of dam when the Jew and the guy were drinking from the same cup. He says the same dog was barking towards the Egyptians, not towards the Jews. So whose dog was it? Was it a Jewish dog or Egyptian dog? L'chayre, either way. Both the Jewish dogs and the Egyptian dogs would bark towards the Egyptians, not towards the Jews. That's what you would assume. Before we begin on our journey, I have to start with the Gemara number 2. B'chlal, the Gemara's opinion concerning owning dogs and how it applies today is not. That's more of a Sunday morning halacha shir, because there's a Rabbi Yankov Emden is well known. He was anti having dogs as pets. He said if you need one for protection, you get the minimum possible and you keep it remote. And he was b'chlal not into it.
What about blind? For blind people?
Okay, yeah, that's necessary. That's like for safety, right? Yeah. So in other words, that's no different than safety.
Okay.
But keep it to a bare minimum. He was known, he has a whole letter, he was not a fan of dogs, and others had a much more lenient approach. And today we're not going to get to a conclusion whether it's there are many that say it's okay to own a dog and gesunter hate, but we're going to see some fascinating things behind the scenes, okay? Look at number 2. Number 2 is a piece of Gemara which is a negative attitude towards having a dog, but it's talking about a wild dog, okay? Just to be fair, it's talking about a kelev ra, perhaps, a wild dog. It's not a German shepherd, I'm not someone. A people, okay. And number 2. This is a Gemara in Baba Kama. Ubenuchai Yaimar. This is it's a pasuk in Chumash that refers to when the Jews would encamp and the Oren would come to rest. We would say, Shuv Hashem Eibush to return, Riva voice Alpha Yisrael. Come rest upon Riva voice is 2 myriads, 20,000. Alpha Yisrael is 2,000. L'lametcha that teaches you. Ein shchina shoyra al Yisrael pachas, mishnei alof mishnei devavish. You need 22,000 Jews for the shchina to rest. That's the number, based on that pasuk. You need a group of 22, it's a big minyan. Huh? If you have, one of those big Yiddish get-togethers, you want to make sure you hit the 22,000. Once you have that number, you have an asifa, you want 22,000. Now he says like this, imagine chaser achas, imagine you're minus 1. You have 21,999. V'hoisa isha mu'beres beinayim, there's a woman who's pregnant. She's carrying the final one. Now, is the baby considered alive while it's in the stomach? So that's another halachic shaila.
Who said anything about boys?
Right, also.
No.
That's what it's called. So, yeah.
Woman can do. So it's
V'ru'uya lahashlim, okay, all these good questions. The uber could be the last one. V'navach bo kelev, and a dog barks. V'hipila, and she miscarries. You know what that dog chorus blew it. Blew the whole thing. Now God's not coming. The Shechina will not rest. Nimsa comes out, Ze goydem l'Shechina shetistalach miYisrael. Right, so we're pointing at, this is a conceptual idea. The Gemara is painting a conceptual idea. Imagine. What? L'chayra not. No. It's telling you, Imagine what the destruction the dog can cause, right? It's a pretty imaginative situation. But then the Gemara says, "You want a story? I'll tell you a story. You can go and come back in 2 minutes if you want. If you don't
I
know.
want to.
Okay, Hahi said there was a woman.
You want to bring your wife?
Da'alas lemeifa, she went in to bake. Bahu beisa, there was a house. She went into a house to bake. Okay, she was pregnant. Navach bo kalba, and the dog ferociously barks at her. So Armalom More, so the owner of the dog always says, right, don't be afraid, friendly, right? This is where it comes from. The day, Lloyd histofi mine, don't be afraid. And he says, Shekule nive, his teeth were removed.
The dog's
His
teeth.
bark is bigger
Right.
than his bite because he can't bite. He doesn't have teeth. So Amrle, she tells him, Shikili tivusech, the thank you that I need to give you, take it, v'shadya, and throw it achizri on the thorns behind you. I'm not giving you a thank you because kvar nod v'lod, the baby has already been dislodged. So thank you for your, don't be scared of the, they always say, after they frighten the kids out of their wits, don't be scared. Anyhow, that's the end. You see the two
bark.
dots, that's the end one.
Just the bark. Meaning.
Yeah, the bark, right. So the Gemara is bringing these two anecdotes. One is potential, the other one is a story that happened. The Gemara there is discussing about not having, let's at least say a wild dog, okay? A tame dog would be different. Okay. So from those stories, though, the Gemara is not such a fan of having these dogs around.
Golden Retriever would clearly not be in this category. Kind of the kid.
Atazai. We're going to see about that.
Trust
In
the
fact,
Hungarian
you should
dog.
know, we're going to look, don't worry, we're going to cover all base. We're going to learn about the friendly dogs too. Don't worry, we're going to learn about them. Okay, so, fine. So it's funny. Moshe Rabbeinu makes a point to tell Paro, you should know the dogs aren't going to bark, right? It sounds like completely random. It's like that's what Paro needs to hear, You should know we're going to go and the dogs aren't going to bark. Random. So some hold the Tzurur Hamur is an old, Avram Saba was his name. He was a refugee from Spain in 1492. And there's incredible stories about him. He went to Portugal. After the expulsion in 1492 from Spain, he went to Portugal with many Jews, and with the whole community, in fact. And then in 1497, Portugal King Manuel made a decree, a forced conversion, different than Spain. You see, in Spain, it was an expulsion. Leave. You want to stay as a Christian. In Portugal, 5 years later, it was more just a forced conversion. He didn't want the Jews to leave. He wanted them to stay. And he just said, stay as Christians. So what happened to Avram Saba was very quickly, that it was a decree throughout Portugal that every single Jewish kid has to be brought to Lisbon. So all the Jewish communities were taken, and Avram Saba came with a trunk, a suitcase, full of his manuscripts that he had written. Comes to a hotel outside Lisbon, and a Jew meets him and he says, Rabbi, you're carrying tefillin? If the guy and find you with tefillin, they're going to kill you on the spot. So late at night, he went with another Jew, and under an olive tree, he dug and buried his holy items and all of his manuscripts. He buried all of his manuscripts under an olive tree. And then, shortly after he had to come to the Lisbon itself, 2 of his sons were taken from him, were forcibly baptized, and he refused. He was thrown into a prison. Thousands of Jews. He was there for a number of months, until the Rav of Lisbon, his name was Shimon Miami. Shimon Miami. And they wanted to make an example out of him, to force him to convert. He refused. They stuck him into the ground, to his neck. He was buried into the earth till his neck. And he was starving. And they said, convert. He said, never. 1 day, 2 days, till 7 days, and then he died. That's how the Rav died. Here's the twist. The head of security of the prison, when he saw this, his heart broke. So he opened up broke down a small wall, and he told the people, "You guys have 3 hours to go. Anyone wants to leave, go. And hundreds of Jews, Avram Saba included, was able to escape from the prison, and right away he got on a boat and he went down south to Morocco. And he lived in Morocco for a few years, but he had no Sfarim. He went to Turkey, to Istanbul, big libraries, and he writes that what he wanted to do so much was to rewrite all of his works. 40 years of his works was all lost, stuck under an olive tree, probably to this day, who knows, still there in Lisbon. And he tried to rewrite everything from memory. And sometimes in his Sefer he says, I had a really good explanation about this and I can't recall it. I wrote it in my old manuscript, can't recall it. Anyhow, fascinating fellow. Avram Saba was his name. And he writes that the dogs here that Moshe is talking about are not dogs. No. He's talking about the Egyptians. He's talking about the Egyptians. Moshe tells Paro, you think we're not leaving? Not only we're going to leave, but you and your entire country are going to. No, you're not going to say a word. You're going to stand silently and watch. No dog is going to bark. When we leave, no one is going to get in our way. No one will protest. You're being a big shot now. When the time comes, you're all going to be shut quiet as we leave. That's how he learns. It was a very sharp comment from Moshe, referring to Paro's people as dogs. On the other hand, it could be Moshe didn't want, out of respect, he said the dogs. In other words, didn't want to say openly. Just like Moshe told Paro, all your servants are going to beg me. And he meant Paro himself, but he wouldn't say that clearly. He said Paro's servants. So it could be he referred to the dogs as a sign of, trying to shift the item of discussion. But it refers to the actual goyim. That's his take on it. You should know, there's an old, so we're going to move, don't worry. There's an old sefer. I mentioned this not too long ago. There's an old sefer called Sefer Kushis, the book of questions. Okay, it was printed from manuscript not too long ago. The printer alleges it's from one of the Rishonim, 1200s, because all the people that this sefer quotes are from that time period and earlier. Nobody later. It seems like it was one of the German scholars in the times of the Rosh, the end of the 1200s, early 1300s. It's a sefer that has, it's a random question and answer about the most interesting things. One of them was, I told you that it says there, why is it that we beat up the witnesses at a time of the chuppah? You ever been by a chuppah and they start smashing the witnesses? It's an old Jewish custom. So he says, why? So remember we said, because how do you know you can marry a woman with money? It says, ki yikach ish isha, when a man takes a wife. When Avram and Ephron were discussing the sale of the field, Avram tells Ephron, here's the money, kach, take the money. So it says kach about money with Avram and Ephron. It says when a man is kach, when he takes a woman to marry her, it's with money. The gematria of kicha is the same as ktota, which means a fight. So we learn from there that when a marriage is created, there's going to be fireworks. So instead of the fireworks being between the chassan and the kala, we give the witnesses a bissel klep, and that way we fulfill the. That's what it says there, right?
How badly?
If you really want to make sure there's no fireworks at all between the chassan, the more you hit the eidim, the more peace there's going to be in the house between the chassan and kala. It doesn't say that, but in the sefer Kushis it says, question. Number, I forgot which number, but why do the Goyim refer to us as dogs? The Goyim call Yidden dogs. He says, you know why? He says 2 reasons. Yidden are Hashem's children. Bonim atem l'Hashem Elokechem. Bonim is gematria klovim. Dogs is just, it's a gematria for children. And even better, there's a pasuk where Hashem says, Ki li b'nei Yisrael, the Jews are mine. Ki li B'nai Yisrael, Rasha Tevis Kalbi, my dog. Right. So he says the Goyim call us dogs. They don't realize the reason why they do that is because we taka. Kalbi is Rasha Tevis Kili B'nai Yisrael, or Gematria Bonim. And I want to tell you that that I've seen a lot of people. This sefer came out, it was only printed not too long ago, right? It was from an old manuscript. And many people said, oh, this whole sefer is a forgery, it's jokes, it's a joke book, it's not legitimate, it doesn't go back 700 years. And what's their proofs? Because people are often so quick to say, well, that doesn't make sense, and therefore it can't be. And so many people dismissed the sefer. They're hitting the witnesses by the chuppah. Well, it was the dog that actually annoyed more people. More people wrote about the dog thing that this doesn't make sense. Until they found out that the Clay Yoker in one of his forums 400 years ago writes the same thing. You know, so but it's like, and if we wouldn't have found that out, we would have dismissed it. You know, it happens so often that you know, we judge and say, well, that doesn't make sense. You know, and it says we need to be a little bit more open-minded about that. Anyhow, so in Sefer Kushis it says fakert, the dogs are the Jews. So the Sefer Kushis says B'chlal, the Yidden are referred to dogs. Now he doesn't tie it into this week's parsha. That wouldn't really make sense. That L'chol b'nei Yisrael, the dogs won't bark. Now, he doesn't tie it into this pasuk, but he says B'chlal, the real dogs. Dog is just a mushal for the Jews because of the letters, the banim or the Rosh Hashanah. Fine. The Tzror Hamor says fakert. In this pasuk, the dogs are the goyim. The goyim are the dogs. So you know, it's a polar opposite. Okay. Many Mefarshim wonder. Hold on. What? Do dogs always bark? Not always. What was the big miracle that dogs didn't bark? As if they always bark. Dogs always bark. It's a must. They always bark. Like, why is Moshe saying, you know how surprised you're going to be? The dogs aren't going to bark, right? What? As if they have to bark. So you'll be amazed that the Mefarshim, for hundreds of years, are discussing why should it have been that the dogs bark. So look at the Torah in number 4 for a second. Number 4, lo yechratz kelev l'shoinoi. The dogs will not sharpen their tongue. He's an afapi because the city was malay and nevelis. Dogs love meat. They love meat. The night of Makas B'choris is dead bodies strewn everywhere. V'derech haklovim linvoyach, they bark on nevelis. So number 1 is there's dead bodies everywhere. They should have barked. The gam number 2, derech kisha holchim bnei adam b'lailus. When people walk around that night, haklovim and afchim, the dogs bark. The kolshken, and thirdly, shahaya hadever be'ir, there was a plague here. Varminanon, we say, klovim tzayikim, if dogs bark, you should know the Malach HaMovis has come to the city. And afal pikein lo yechretz kelev l'shonei. Says the Tur, there's 3 reasons they should have barked. By the way, the Tur, this is the Baal HaTurim, but most often in Chumashim you see the Baal HaTurim, it's only part of his commentary, the Gematrius and this and that. That's only a portion of his commentary. The main part of the commentary is a whole sefer on its own right, and it's a great sefer. And over here the Tur says there are 3 reasons the dog should have barked. Number 1, the city's full of dead meat, there's nevelis everywhere. Number 2, people are walking around at night. Number 3, when there's a plague, that means the Malach HaMovis is there. When the Malach HaMovis is in the city, the dogs go wild. How do I know that? Look at number 1. Number 1 is a Gemara in Baba Kama, Toner Rabban, and the rabbis taught. Klovim boichim, if dogs are screaming, Malach HaMovis ba'le'ir, the Malach HaMovis is in town. The dogs can sense it, yeah, they can sense. You know, Rashi writes that in Chumash that a human who is has a rational mind, you know, the mind would not be able to tolerate, and
Sounds like the first trigger is the dogs barking and then the Malachmavis comes.
no, it's a simon. It means it's a simon. If klovim are screaming, you should know the Malach HaMovis has come. Klovim mesachkim, if you see dogs are laughing, panting and laughing, it's Eliyahu Hanavi's in the city. So yeah, the dogs sense it. The dogs sense it. So it's a Gemara in Baba Kama. If the dog, thank you so much. If the dogs are screaming, you should know that there's something's coming. Sometimes the dogs scream, and you know before a disaster arrives, they have a sense.
I never heard sensing good, that's great.
Yeah, both. Yeah, exactly. The Gemara says no, they sense both. When the dog is panting and laughing, it's a good sign. There's good things happening. Says that's the bright. Says the Gemara, Heni mili delay spuhuna keva. That's only if there's no female dog there. if there's male dogs, if only a group of male dogs, then this is the code. If they're screaming, the Malach HaMavos. If they're laughing, Eliyahu Hanavi. But if there's a female dog, they're all bets are off. Then all bets are off. No.
They're running like crazy.
They could scream, they could laugh. You have no idea why. It's all her fault. So that's what. So the Tur says based on that. Wait. If when the Malach HaMavos is in the city, the dogs lose it. So on the night of Makas B'chayos, there's never the Malach HaMavos, the busiest night of his life, right? They're dying everywhere. Even though we say that the Eibishter is the one who did Makas B'chayos, but it was together. It was the Eibishter together with the Malach HaMavos. That's why the Yidden were told to stay indoors until morning. The Pasuk says clearly, because if you're outside, the mashkas can destroy you. It's the Eibishter himself, but he went with it was the Eibishter together with the Malach HaMavos. Some Mefarshim say that the two, that every Bechor was knocked off. The Eibishter, the moment of midnight, the Eibishter, gave the guy a makkah, and death began. Took a few hours though. Until morning, maybe it was the same time when the Jews left, when the firstborn, their death was completed, and that was done by the hand of the Malach HaMavos. So what happened by midnight was the Eibishter Alein, but the aftermath, the final clincher was done by the Malach HaMavos. But that's clear because the Jews were told to stay indoors until morning. So if the Malach HaMavos is in town, the Gemara says in Baba Kama, the dogs are going to bark. And says the Tur, and yet the dogs didn't bark. The dogs should have barked because the Malach HaMavos. They should have barked because when people b'chal walk around at night, gets them nervous. Right? Is that true? Maybe to some degree. And maybe not your dog, but
My dog only barks at the mailman. Mail lady.
The mailman must be a
Mail
Leono.
lady.
And the other thing with it sees meat, if a dog sees meat sitting there, it barks. It could be out of excitement. But the fact is, it makes a lot of noise. So the Torah says there were 3 reasons, and that was the chiddush that nonetheless it didn't bark. Yeah.
People are dying. Nobody's walking around.
The Jews. Oh, you say who was walking around? No, the Mitzrayim were all going crazy.
The Jews are indoors.
The Mitzrayim.
Jews are indoors.
Not all the
The
Jews.
non-Bechayim.
Yeah, the non-Bechayim.
Non-Bechayim were running out of their houses.
Yeah, they're
calling
going
for
nuts.
medics.
They were calling for help.
You think
Paro,
so?
even Paro was
Yeah,
running
they're
around.
Running around calling for medics. They're running-
CPR.
Even
by
Paro
night?
was running.
Medic,
By night,
medic.
Where's
midnight.
Hatzalah? When you need
Hatzalah
it.
was
The
in-
Goyim, that's right. That's all was indoor, exactly. They turned off.
They turned off their-
The only night in history that they turned off
Yeah, they turned off their-
They didn't turn it off. They had it on. They can't turn off. Those things don't turn off.
They ignored it.
Some people never turn on.
So that's what the Tur says. You should know. Many Mefarshim discuss what would be the reason the dogs would have barked. Some say the Riva, one of the Baalei Tosfos, has a commentary on Chumash. He says when dogs see a person with a stick, it gets them very nervous. They start barking.
That's true.
And he says the Jews were eating the Korban Pesach. The mitzvah was to eat the Korban Pesach with sticks in their hand. Makelchem beyedchem, sticks in your hand. Yes, the pasuk. They didn't ate the Korban Pesach holding their sticks. It was only for that year. Not every year do you hold your stick, right? There's
No joke.
There's a good joke about that, but we'll leave that for now because we're on air. Now, which dogs would have seen them? We're going to see the Jews had tons of dogs. The Jews owned many dogs, so their own dogs who saw them holding their sticks should have barked. No, the dogs didn't bark. I think one of the common explanations is when a dog hears loud noise.
You get scared.
Yeah. You know the loudest night ever in history was the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Moshe said, "V'hoisa tzaka gdela, a major tzaka, a major scream." The dogs should have barked. The dogs should have barked because of the major scream.
They don't yet bark. They yell.
And yet they didn't. Look at number 5, just to see about this scream. This is from the Medrash Haggadol. It's a Medrash called Medrash Haggadol. V'hoisa tzaka gdela b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. The whole Egypt will be full of cry. Amru. They say a story like this. B'shah Amar Moshe, when Moshe warned Paro, and he said, it was the same warning when Moshe said that the dogs won't bark. He said, you should know, a huge cry throughout Egypt. Yatzas Keina Achas Likros, an old Egyptian woman, went to greet Moshe, and she told him, Moshe, Navi shall sheker ata, you're a liar. This is before the mak actually happens. She says you're a liar. Zekaina, an old woman, she'ein lo loy av loy em, an old woman, she has no parents. Loy ach, no brother, loy achas, no sister. Loy ben v'loy bas, no daughter or son. Al mi titzach, who's she going to cry for? You said every Egyptian is going to be screaming. What am I going to be screaming about?
It says every?
It says, V'yitzak g'dol b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, b'chol. It doesn't just say in Mitzrayim, b'chol. So she says, she tells Moshe, you know, Amar Allah, he says, Ha'avoid, I swear by God, taktim tzarkoscha letzarkosam. Your cry will be before the cry of the rest. Amr, they said, you know what happened? Ben Echad, she had a son earlier, Vames, he had died years before. Va'asasa diyoikna, she had made his image. Delish, I don't know what that is. Benus bena, she had some either some sculpture maybe in the image of her son. Ubechol yom v'yom, every day. Acher shoycheles v'shoyse, after she would eat and drink, hoyse oimedes, she would stand in front of this sculpture of her child, umarakedes lefonav, and dance. That's how she communicated, so to speak, was in touch with her deceased boy. Bo'oisel, you know what happened the night of the 15th? Bo klovim, the dogs came v'shamtu, and they schlepped out the statue. They schlepped it out outside. V'oisa boicha, she was screaming and crying. But Sayekes, she was crying over her son. So even she cried too. It's interesting to notice that who did it was the dogs. Interesting. Hold on to that thought. Now the dogs had a part in making sure Makas Bechayris was actually, and this was the beginning. Moshe said, "You're going to be the first." It's almost like the Makkah was set in motion by the action of the dogs. Look at number 6. This is in the commentary, Torah Shlema. Number 6, he says, "Kosav b'medrash shir hashirim." It's written in the Medrash Shir Hashirim, which we don't have today. Al isha achas, there was a certain woman, shehitmina es b'na b'rosh hagag. The night of the 15th, by Makas B'chayris, she hid her son, top of the roof. Mipnei sham, because Moshe said, meis kol b'chor, every firstborn will die. Because she thought she not al rosh hagag, on the roof he'll be safe. This Egyptian woman, she hides her son on top of the roof. He gishu b'aklon, the dogs were margish v'achlu. They went up to the roof and they took care of this Egyptian boy. Amda, it's a very sad story, of course. She wakes up in the middle of the night, Lavaksha, to go search for her son on the roof, and the dogs had consumed him. Vihi kitsa kol hamitzrayim b'koila. Her cry was so awful, awesome, great. She woke up the whole Mitzrayim with her voice. So you see with these two stories that the dogs actually had an active role. It's not just they were passive, that during Makas B'chayris, they didn't bark. They had a role in implementing Makas B'chayris. Okay?
Hope there to be cryptic for Kelly.
Yeah, great. Look in number 8 for a moment. Number 8 is a Gemara in Masechta Brachos in the beginning. Many of us are familiar with this. Rabbi Lezer says when it comes to Kriya Shema at night, a person has till the end of the first Ashmura, the first watch of the angels, to say Kriya Shema. So the Gemara wants to know, Rabbi Lezer, what does he hold? If Rabbi Lezer holds that every night has 3 mishmaros, 3 groups of angels that take turn praising Hashem, so let Rabbi Lezer say, you can say Kriya Shema from the beginning of the night, Ad Arba Shos, till 4 hours in, 1/3. If he holds Arba Mishmaros is the night, each one is 3 hours. So you should say till the end of 3 hours. Rabbi Lezer says you could say Shema, the first Mishnah Masechta Brachos, even if you haven't gotten that far in Shas, but the first Mishnah of Shas, Rabbi Lezer says, Kriya Shema at night, the end time is at the end of the first Mishmar. So, fact the Gemara, let him be clear. If he holds his 3 mishmaros in the night, each one 4 hours, say you have till 4 hours. If he holds his 4 mishmaros, each one 3 hours, say you have 3 hours. Says the Gemara, no. La'olam really in the 4th line. Kasavar, he holds 3 mishmaros are in the night. V'haka mashmalon. What he wants to tell you is, Ika mishmaros barakia, Ika mishmaros ba'ara. The watches that the night is divided in is both in heaven and on earth. Just like in heaven there's different groups of angels and there's a changing of the guards at every portion of the night, so too down here there's a changing of the guards in physical phenomena as well. Tanya, there's a brisa. Rabbi Lezer Eimer, Shalosh mishmaros have there's 3. On every mishmar Hashem sits v'shoyeg and he screams, Kari, he roars like a lion. As the pasuk says, Hashem mimorim yishog, the Eibishter from up on high will roar. Umim'ayin kodsher, from the abode of his holiness, Yitan Koila, he will cast his voice. Shoy gishag al naveo, he will scream over his abode, talking about the Churban Beis Hamikdash. It says 3 times the word shog, Hashem roars. So there are 3 groups in heaven through every night, and the 3 mishmaros, and by each one the Eibishter gives out a roar. The similar dover. How can you detect it down here on planet Earth? Mishmar Rishon, the first Mishmar Charmor Noya, the donkey's braying. Shnia, during the second, Klovim Tzoikim, dogs are barking. Shlishis, in the third one, Tinik Yonik Mishtei Imoi, the baby nurses from the mother. The Isha Mesaperes and Baila, the husband and wife are talking to each other. Now sometimes the word talking is just a lishna ma'alya, is a polite way of speaking about relations. But actually over here it seems to mean literally talking. The end of the night, I guess if the mother is nursing the kid, she's going to let her husband sleep over there. She's nursing the kid. She wakes him up and she starts talking. By the way, if you notice, he's not talking. It says the wife speaks with the husband. He's trying to sleep. But if she's up anyways nursing the kid, she makes sure that he's up. Anyhow. So says the Gemara, wait a second. My kachoshev, what does Rabbi Lezer hold? Eat chilas mishmaris kachoshev. Do each of these 3 things happen at the beginning? There are 3 parts of the night. So each of these 3 physical phenomena, the donkey, the dogs, and the baby nursing, is each one of those at the beginning of each mishmar? So then, if so, mishmar simana lamali. So then, why do you have to tell me? You should know when the first watch begins. It begins at nightfall. Urti, it's night. Isais mishmaris kachashiv. If Rabbi Lezer is telling you the time of the end of each of the guards, well, the third one ends by dawn. Saif mishmar lamali, it's day. Ella says the Gemara like this. Chashiv smaif mishmar rishoner. Rabbi Lezer says the end of the first mishmar. You want to detect it, it's when the donkey brays. So the donkey doesn't do it the entire time. It's the end of the first. The tchilas mishmara achroina, the beginning of the third, is when the baby is nursing from the mother. The emtsois to emtsoisa. The middle of the second is when the dogs bark. Now if there's 3 mishmaras, then what's the middle of the second? Midnight. That means, according to the Gemara in Brachos, midnight is the one time of the 24-hour cycle of the day the donkeys are supposed to bark.
Dogs.
Thank you very much, the dogs. So look at number 7. The Chizkuni says in this week, Lo yechras kelev l'shoynoi, says the Chizkuni, Minig ha'klovim l'nvayach achatz chatzos. Dogs are supposed to bark by chatzos. The fishuhu mishmarton, that's their mishmar, like it says in Brachos, that during the second one the dogs bark. The Eilu, and whereas the Yidden Yishkum, they're going to get up early, they're going to have their sticks in their hands, and the dogs, Lo Yinchu, the dogs will not bark. He doesn't say it as sharp as he could, he just says, well, the second Mishmar, B'chlal, dogs bark. You could say it even sharper. Moshe is telling Paroi, midnight, the firstborn will die. That moment is the time that dogs bark. They're not going to bark. It's exact midnight. That's what the Gemara says in number 8. The middle of the middle. So this is another reason why the dogs would have barked. Comes Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz and he throws in a beautiful twist. When did the firstborns die? It was exactly midnight. Hashem told Moshe midnight. What did Moshe tell Paroi? around midnight. Around. Why? Because Moshe knew that the Egyptians are going to be watching their clocks, and if they're going to be 10 seconds off, they're going to think, oh, you see, Makas B'chayr. So Frek Reb Yonis said, I didn't get it. According to the Gemara in Brachos, the dogs bark exactly midnight. So why can't Moshe prove to Paroi, the firstborns will die exactly midnight, and the proof will be not your watch, the proof will be the dogs. So Moshe should have said to Paroi, the firstborns will die midnight mamish, and you have on your clocks 12:01 or 11:59, you're off because the dogs are going to bark exactly when the firstborns die. So why did Moshe have to say around midnight? Moshe should say midnight and he'll prove it by the dogs. So that's why Moshe told Paroi, I can't do that. The dogs aren't going to be barking that night. So he learns the reason why Moshe is talking about the dogs is Moshe is explaining himself. Moshe is telling Paroi it's going to be around midnight. And Moshe is telling Paroi that, I'm not going to tell you exact, because I know I'm exact, but you're going to think I'm off. And if you're going to ask, why didn't I prove it from the dogs? Well, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, the dogs aren't going to bark. That's how Rabbi Yonason learns a typical chap from Yonason Eibishus. But that's based on this Gemara. So this is another reason the dogs should have barked. We have, because it's midnight, we have that sticks in their hand. We have the 3 reasons of the tour. There's nevelos everywhere. There's people roaming around at night. The Malach HaMavis was in the city. And yet, the dogs did not make noise, at least for the Jews. We saw in number 3, Rabbeinu Bechaya, which is really from a Medrash Rabbah. There were dogs barking that night towards the Egyptians, but not towards the Jews. Look at number 9, back to Rabbeinu Bechaya. Val derech HaKabbalah, he says, you want to know Kabbalistically, what is the connection between the dogs barking and makas b'chayros? He says, Kiyadu, you got to know. Ki akelev chaya. The word gashmis is a mistake. It's supposed to be mashchis. A dog can be a wilde chaya, a destructive species. Of course, not if it's tame and it's a pet dog. But a dog has potential to be a wild. To be vicious. Lo yispa lo olam, they're never satiated. V'chein amar hanov, it says in Yishai, lo yedu sov, they don't know, that they're never full. They're always looking for more. V'akoyach hamashchis, and the destructive power, lo yispa lo olam, is never satiated. It says, hav, give me more, give me more, give me more. Uba'avur, and because, ki hanave, okay, there's a hanavela v'atreifa lokum mitzad koyach hamashchis. The Torah says in Parshas Mishpatim, if you have an animal that's a treifa, you should throw it to a dog. We'll learn more about that in just a moment on the next page. You should throw it towards a dog. He says this animal, a treifa, was torn apart by a vicious force. So that meat was torn apart by a destructive force. So therefore the Torah says give it to the dog. Lekach tzivsa Torah, to give the treifa to the dog. And it says la kelev tashlichun, because the dogs me oisei tzadhem. So, and he goes on to explain that's the connection of the dogs to Mitzrayim, that the Mitzrayim have that same negative energy as Klovim. So he has a very negative look upon dogs, and he believes that the reason we give dogs treif meat, it's not a positive thing. It's because treif meat has been torn apart. It's an animal that was torn apart by another animal. And you just say, you know what? Give it to the dogs, because they represent that negative energy. Okay? Join me on the next page for a moment. Okay, hold on. Okay, now things get interesting. Number 10. Join me in the 3rd line of number 10. It speaks about the wealth of Yankov Avinu. Rab Abba Bar Kana Omar. Meya v'tarte, number 10, the 4th line. Meya is 100, v'tarte riboy. 120 times 10,000, 1.2 million, plus Shiva Alofim, another 7,000, Omosan and 200. Edrin, our flock of sheep, Havale Yankov Avinu. Rab Levi Yomer looked down, Shishim Ribui Klovim. Yankov had 600,000 dogs to watch the 1.2 million sheep. Rabban and Omri double the amount. Meya ve'esrin riboy, 1.2 million dogs. V'la pligi, the debate is not about the sheep. Man da Amar Shishim Riboy, the one that says there was 600,000 dogs. L'chol Eider ve'Eider Chad Kelev. For each of the flock, there was one guard dog, watchdog. Man dar Meves, and those that say it was 1.2 million believes every flock needs 2 watchdogs. So Yankov had 1.2 million flock of sheep. The shah is how many dogs? Do you need one?
One dog per 2 sheep?
I'm sorry, he had.
600,000 sheep.
The lower number, it says that he had the same amount.
Hold on, wait, what are we reading wrong over here? He had 1.2 million sheep.
Right.
No, you had
Flock
one.
of sheep.
Yeah, flock of sheep.
No,
Hold on. Yeah, wait. Now, the Medrash first says it's 1.2 million flock of sheep, and then it says the shitta that holds 600,000 believes each one had one dog. Yeah, it seems to be it seems to be an issue over here. Okay, but either way, he either had 600,000 dogs or 1.2 million. That's a lot of dogs. What happened to all those dogs and all those flock? L'cher, when Yankov and his family came to Mitzrayim, to the land of Goshen, they brought the whole entourage. Which means while the Yidden were in Goshen, by the way, in Mitzrayim there were a number of wealthy Jews. Not all Jews suffered at the hands of Mitzrayim.
Levium, yeah.
Right, yeah. Even amongst the Yisraelim, there were wealthy Balabatim.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, some of these wealthy Balabatim had Jewish slaves.
Right.
There is a medrash, a frightening medrash, that says that Hashem told Moshe and Aaron, before you want to convince Paro to let go of the Jewish slaves, you got to tell the Jewish Balabatim to free their Jewish slaves. It has to start at home. Yeah, it's a medrash. It has to start at home. When the Jewish Balabatim we will let go of their Jewish servants and maidservants in their home, then Paro follows suit.
Sorry.
So
Where's
They-
the
they-
Medrash Rabbah?
this is Medrash Rabbah. This is Medrash Rabbah. Yeah, the Medrash I'm quoting is actually found in the Torah Shlomo. This is in Vayetze.
So the only problem is
Yeah.
that if Yaakov went with 70 people and he took 1.2 million sheep,
Yeah.
he needed the dogs to guard the sheep.
Oh,
because
Yankov
70
probably had lot. There were servants that came with him to Mitzrayim.
Total
70 is his kids.
I'm talking about
His
the
kids,
family,
yeah, but
70.
there were lots of other people.
With the upper
I mean, but still, a million too.
It's a big-
It's a huge.
Yeah, so they had lots of
improvement.
shepherds.
No, they didn't need it. They had the dogs.
Why would no? They're the watchmen. Why was it that all of Yankov's sons were shepherds? Why are they all shepherds? All the Shvatim were shepherds. You ever wonder? They're all shepherds. They had a massive arrangement going on over there. They had a million
I think
sheep.
it means either for every 2 flocks, one
Dog.
dog.
Yeah.
And the other one says
Yeah.
But
one.
they say flock.
But
is
the
it
end-
individual sheep, or is it a group of sheep?
No, but man the armor may have 1.2. The whole aid the train Kalbin. The last line with the whole aid the train Kalbin. Anyhow, so the words like this though, when the reason why all the Shvatim were shepherds is because Yankov had a major organization of that, a major situation. They came to Egypt, and the Yidden ended up inheriting these dogs. In fact, look at number 11. It's a Yalkut Shemoni in Bishalach. When the Jews left Mitzrayim, they all went with their dogs. The dogs that they had yarshent. He says, Vayar Yisrael es Mitzrayim meis. The Jews saw the Egyptians dead, spat out by the sea. Ma hoyosim, what did they do? Hoyakol echad ve'echam Yisrael. Every Jew took his dog. Hoylich v'noisnes ragli al savor shel Mitzri. He put his leg on the neck of the Egyptian. Vaya'oim l'kabi. He told his dog, Echol min hayad, eat from this hand. Shenishtabdu bi, that put me in servitude. Echol min azroim, eat from this arm. Shaloi chosla, I didn't have pity on me.
real victory.
Made them feel good. That chaleri that beat me. Licking
S
licking
into
the
S.
river.
So hold on. So what's
Not
what?
from the hand. Eat
Well,
the
well, no.
hand.
Whose dogs are these? Moshe told Paro, "We're going to take your animals because we might need them for karbonos. Now you can't bring a dog as a carbon. So you think the Jews took dogs from the Mitzrayim? No. So where they'll get dogs from? The answer is the Yidden. They're in Goshen. from Yankov's million dogs or so,
They're French.
every Jew had a dog.
They're a shepherd's,
So you see from here, back then, every Jew had a dog. Yankov, now the dogs were there for the sheep, fine, but ultimately every Jew had a dog.
So now when they
Turning
go,
in
we
your
stop.
favor.
when they
Now
go,
we're
when
turning
they
in
go,
your favor.
and they pass the
Basically.
Sea of Reeds,
Most normal people.
they also took
They
the
have German
flock, right?
Never was.
German Shepherds.
They took flock from Egypt.
That's what I
They
mean.
were
A
shepherds.
lot of dogs would have been their
What
own.
happened? But what happened when they were? Why not the flock? And they eating them the when they have the manna, right? And then they complain that they want meat. I mean, did they have the flock for meat?
But that's they didn't want to shech that. They did not want to shech their stuff. They told the Eibishter, they said, God, the animals we have, we deserve that for our suffering in Egypt. That's ours. It's rightfully ours. You want us to wander in the desert, you supply us food. We're not covering the cost, you owe it to us.
Sounds like a Jew.
You want to know something? The Chidah famously asks, why is it we have a Yom Tov, Sukkot, to celebrate the clouds of glory? There's no Yom Tov to celebrate the Mun. There's no Yom Tov to celebrate the water of Miriam. That was much more critical and essential for life. We celebrate Sukkot, the Anoni Yaakov. So the Chidah says, when the Eibusha took us in the desert, he owes us food and drink. He owed it to us. What does he expect? He takes us there, he owes it to us. We went where he wanted to take us. He has to give us food. He's giving it in the guise of mon. Well, that's his choice. Thank you very much. He needed to give us food and drink. The Anoni Yaakov to provide us shade. That the Abish didn't owe it to us.
Beautiful.
He gave it to us only because he
Loves us.
exactly. So that's what we celebrate.
Beautiful.
How you like it, huh?
That's spectacular. That's it. That's
Oh,
all in.
so back to our thing. So first of all, the Jews, Yankov had, the Jews had. It's pretty clear that the Jews, when they left, they did not take dogs from Mitzrayim. Moshe told Pari, we're only going to take animals to use for korbanos. Dogs aren't used for korbanos. These dogs must have been inherited from the million that Yaakov had. Oh, so here we come to number 12. Number 12 is a statement, it's Yalkut Shemoni in this week's Parsha. Number 11 is the Yalkut Shemoni in next week's Parsha by the Yamsuf. 12 is in this week's Parsha. Says the following story. Rabbi Yeshaya, Talmidoi shel Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. Rabbi Yeshaya was a student of Chanina ben Doisa. Chanina ben Doisa was a Tana who was famous for miracles and for his piety. We don't know much Torah from him, but piety and the miracles. The last year we had about not benefiting from miraculous items, the story of the vinegar, that was with him and his daughter, remember?
Yeah.
And we learned from him that Friday afternoon you're running to shul, you see your daughter's a little upset, you stop and you ask her what's going on. And then you cheer her up, and if you need to make a miracle, you make a miracle, you know. So look in number 12. Rabbi Shai was his student. Hoya mis'ana shmoinim v'chomish times, 85 fasts. It's Rabbi Shai fasted. Omar, he said like this: Klovim, dogs. It says about them in the Navi Yeshaya HaNavi. It says haklovim azei nefesh. Dogs are chutzpahdik. Dogs are chutzpahdik. Azei nefesh, they're audacious. So Rabbi Yeshaya wondered, Yizku loy marshirazu, they should merit to sing the following song. You know what songs the dogs sing? Pasuk and Tilim. Boyu nishtacha v'leskor, prostrate ourselves. Nichra, bow down. Nivrucha, let's bench lefnei Hashem Oseinu. All the animals in the world sing. There's a story, the Maggid of Mizrich once woke up, it was in the middle of the night, he told his students, the Alter Rebbe, his friends, he says, come with me. He took them on a trip in the middle of the night to a swamp or a pond. And he says, shh, shh, listen. He says, you hear the frogs? Rabbit, rabbit. He says, no, you got to listen. If you know how to listen, you'll hear them praising the Eibishter. Now he took him for a trip. So, but you know, I took the Bachrim on a trip yesterday. People are like, are you taking Bachrim on trips in the middle of the year? Said the Maggid took his middle of the night, they went on a midnight. It happened. Listen, these are the things that stay with you forever. And so Yabishaya wanted to know, dogs. What?
You guys went to listen to the frogs?
We went to hit golf balls, but it says in Yeshaya that the Klovim are chutzpah, they have a azay nefesh, a chutzpah soul. We'll see more about that in just a moment. But they should be zocheh to sing a beautiful song. So he fasted 85 fasts, like this was his question, right? He fasted, now 85 fasts, it's a lot of, by the way, it's a lot of tanis. Nena oisem, an angel came down from heaven and said, Yeshaya, this is the Tana Yeshaya, Ad Mosai atom isana al oisei dover. Why are you fasting to find out the secret of the dogs? Gzeirohi milfana milfnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a decree from God. From the day that he revealed the secret to Habakkuk the prophet, nobody ever knew the secret. Loi gila dover zeh l'shum berish. No one ever heard the secret of the dogs. But because, not you, but because of your Rebbe, Chanina ben Dosa, ele b'shvil sha'ata shetalmida shel chacham gadol. This is a source that Chanina ben Dosa was a big chacham. People think he was more of a Chassidic Rebbe and stories and moifsim. We don't really have much halacha from him. The Frierdiker Rebbe was in America, came to America. It was J.B. Soloveitchik from Boston spoke, was by a dinner, and he spoke about the Frierdiker Rebbe and his activities, and he compared him to Chanina ben Dosa. So it's a compliment. Some people thought it might have been a backhanded compliment. The Chanina ben Dosa, lots of beautiful stories, miraculous person, keeping Yiddishkeit aflame, but we don't have any shiurim from him. So they took it as a. But there's just speculation. There's a speculation about that comment that he made.
At one point, and the Rebbe.
Yeah, for sure. No, he's a good man. And the question is just when. With our Rebbe, he had a rapport. They spoke a lot in Nigla, but with the Frierdiker Rebbe, he wouldn't have been exposed to the Frierdiker Rebbe's prowess of Nigla. In fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe once said a mimer, and during the mimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe went off to a whole Nigla explanation. When the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote the mimer, he left that whole chunk out. So our Rebbe asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, when you're writing the mimer, you have all the chassidus, but you had such a good, he threw in such a good thing over there, why do you take it out? So Frierdiker Rebbe says, my Indian is to write chassidus. So I'm not recording that. That's not my, I threw it in when I spoke, but... So the
Rabbi Soloveitchik knew this.
Yeah, but I'm saying over here it calls Chanina ben Dosa Chacham Gadol, which is interesting. It sheds light on that whole thing, right? If you say exactly. Anyhow, but the Lekach, so the Malach says, Zikaku li min hashamayim, from heaven, they have incharged me. V'shulchuni eilecha, they have sent me to you, and I'm going to tell you the answer. Klovim, it says about them in this week's parsha, Ulechol bnei Yisrael lo yechretz kelev l'shoinoi. The dogs won't bark. Because the dogs zip their mouth shut, therefore they're zoiche to sing a shira. Everybody asks, the dogs, they shed the tzfardim, the frogs, jumped into open fire. We had a shira about it once in Europe. The frogs jumped into ovens with a fire and they were burnt. Right? One medrash holds those frogs were dafka, the ones that weren't burnt, fine. But the frogs jumped into fire. And they didn't get any special reward. And the dogs over here, so as they say, sometimes it's easier to jump into fire than to zip your mouth. Than to zip your mouth when you want to say something. So the fact that the dogs were quiet, they got a special reward. But it continues, hold on. V'loi oid, they got another reward. When you take hides from a cow to ride Sefer Torah, Tefillin and Mezuzahs, you know what happens? You need to get hold of excrement from a dog to treat the hides of cows. It's done till today.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
This
I
medrash, the Malach tells Rabbi Yeshaya that when you want to treat the hide, you need the excrement of a dog. Why? Also because they zip their mouth. And the question that you asked, go back. In other words, don't ask questions. As it says, if you it's hard to know what that means. Whether it's telling,
trouble.
Yeah, keeps you out of trouble. So either it's telling Rabbi Yeshaya, better stop asking these questions. Or I don't know, maybe this is what the dogs did. They were showing piv, they didn't say anything. Okay. But what you see from this medrash is the dogs got two rewards. One is they sing a special song. Number two is they're used to treat the hides, to make Sefer Torah, tefillin, and mezuzahs. For what? For one thing, that they didn't. Now hold on, wait a second. We know there's something else they got. Look at Rashi in number 13. This is a Rashi in Mishpatim. The pasuk says, if you have an animal which is a treifa, there are two ways a kosher animal could be unfit to be eaten. You have a cow. If the shchita goes wrong or it dies on its own, it's an avela. It died. Treif is if it was torn apart. When it comes, and a treif is an animal that has a mortal wound that it won't live for another 12 months, it's forbidden to eat even if you shecht it. It happens to be a treifa which is going to die from a mortal wound. If you shecht it, you can't eat, but it doesn't have any tumah. It's considered, if an animal's shechted, it doesn't give off any tumah because there's only tumah if it died naturally. If it's going to die from a mortal wound, but you catch it and you shecht it before it dies, you can't eat the meat. It's treif meat. No tumah. If it dies in a vela, then there's tumah. It's an interesting difference. But as far as eating, they're both aloy sasa, both get malchus. The pasuk in Mishpatim says, treifa meat you give to a dog. In Parshas Re'eh it says, nevela meat you give to a goy. So Rashi says like this: La kelev tashlichun oisai. Cast the treif meat to a dog in Mishpatim. He says, af hu, even the guy is like a dog. Now that doesn't mean a guy's mom. It means that the guy, you can also give it to a guy. You're allowed to, right, exactly, yeah, you're allowed to sell it, yeah. No, maybe it means mamish a dog. So he says, but in Parshas Re'eh, it says about an avela, you could sell it to a guy. So kal v'chomer. If an avela, which is more serious because it gives off tumah, you're allowed to give it to a goy. So kal v'chomer treifa, it's muteres b'chol hanois, you can give it to a goy too. So why did the pasuk say a dog? The Torah is teaching you, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekapech schar kol beria. The Eibishter does not hold back the reward of any being. It says, L'chol b'nei Yisrael, the dogs didn't sharpen their tongues. Hashem says, Tnu lo schar, give it the reward. So the Chatchila, you give the treifa to a dog. So now the dogs have three rewards. They're getting meat, they're getting a special song, and using the Sefer Torah Moses. Now, if you notice in Rabbeinu Bechai in number 9, he says to the dog you should give treifa and nevela. The truth is in Chumash, it says you should give.
That was Lignai, no?
Yeah, Lignai. But he put together the nevela, treifa, give it to the dog. He said seemed to be the Gnai. It was torn apart by a mashchetz, give it. But the truth, if you look in Chumash, by the treifa it says give it to a dog. By nevela it says give it to a guy. So the Shach ala Torah, I don't have him on the paper, but he has a beautiful piece in this week's parsha, a long piece. It's real worth a read. The Shach ala Torah, Mordechai HaKohen, he was a student of the Arizal, probably a student of a student. He was part of the Cubs. The Arizal is the Lion, and there's a group called the Cubs. Not the Chicago Cubs, but the Tzfas Cubs, the Cubs of the Arizal. And he wrote a commentary on Chumash, Shach, Kohen ala Torah, and Kabbalistic. The Rebbe quotes it. It's a very important, very substantial commentary, and he has a lot to say. But first of all, he says, why would it be that you give only treif meat to a dog and not a nevela? If you look strictly in the Chumash, in Mishpatim where it speaks about treif, it says give to a dog. In Re'eh, in nevela, it says give to a guy. So Rashi we saw here puts them all together. But if you look strictly at the psukim, the pasuk does seem to divide between the two. Says the Shach, an animal that died as an avela, it just died. How did it die? The Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. A dog is allergic. We saw in number 1, the dogs can't handle Malach HaMavis. Don't give them nevela meat. Treifa meat is an animal that was hurt by another animal. That's not the power of the Malach HaMavis. So that you give to a dog. So he says it's actually meduyak. The nevela meat you don't give to a dog. You know, there was a guy in an old city that one day he comes to a Rav and he has a shaila about certain meat. And the Rav's like, this is the first time you ever came to me? You've been here for 15 years, never heard a question. He says, listen, till now, whenever I had an issue with my meat, I would give it to my dog. because I know the dogs, they eat nevela and treif. So if the dog eats it, I knew it was treif. If the dog wouldn't eat it, it must be kosher. Must be kosher. So the Rav asked him, well, if it was going so well, why'd you stop? He says, my dog was a big machmir, was eating everything. So it comes out there are actually 3 rewards to the dog. So the Shachal HaTorah describes that actually the dogs have a number of zchuyos. See, on the one hand, we always speak about the fact they didn't bark. That's one thing. That's one thing. But he quotes a medrash. The Shachal HaTorah quotes a medrash. He says that when the firstborns died on that night, the Egyptians had 2 bitter feelings in their heart. Number 1, they lost their loved ones. Number 2, Moshe was now beyond question. Moshe's prophecy had been proven true till the... So you know what they did when their firstborns died? They hid them, they concealed them, so there wouldn't be any proof. The dogs, all these million dogs, went into homes and exposed them. They dragged out the bodies. And they didn't eat the bodies. They dragged it out and they didn't eat. So the Shachal HaTorah says like this. The fact that they didn't eat the bodies, right? That's why we give them treifa meat now. That reward was for that schus. The fact that they had the schus that they didn't eat the meat, so we give them a reward. Now, you didn't eat then, thank you very much. We'll make sure you have food for the rest of your lives. We give them the treifas. The fact that they exposed the miracle by dragging out those dead bodies. You exposed miracles. That's what a Sefer Torah is. We're going to use you to make a Sefer Torah. And the fact that they didn't sharpen their tongue, they were quiet. From now on, you're going to sing. So he says each of the 3 rewards is directly to one of their zchuyos. The fact they were silent, now they'll sing. The fact they didn't eat the bodies, now they'll get treif meat the rest of their life. And the fact that they exposed the miracle, therefore they're going to be used for Sefer Torah, Tefillah Mezuzahs, which reveal the miracles of the Eibishter.
That's why we put a case for the mezuzah, so we don't kiss it directly.
So here's, just to finish off with the following, that number 14, and now, okay, hold on. This is interesting. Number 14 and 15, very quick. Number 14 is a statement in the end of Psachim. Rav Sheshes says in the name of Elazar ben Azariah, whoever speaks Lashon Hara, whoever receives it, whoever testifies falsely against his friend, all 3 of them should be thrown to the dogs. Because it says in Parshas Mishpatim, throw the treif meat to the dog. It says right afterwards, loisisa shem mashav, don't receive false testimony. V'kari be loisasi, don't give the false testimony. Whoever does that, speaks incorrectly, should be thrown to the dogs. So the Maharal said, why is that? Why should these 3 people, why is their punishment to be thrown to the dogs? He says it's divine justice. The dogs had a desire to bark that night. There were dead bodies around. It was the midnight. The Malach HaMavish was busy. If people wandering at night, all the reasons we saw. And yet, they zipped it. They closed their mouth. So these 3 people who couldn't hold their mouth back, they're busy Lashon Hara, saying false testimony, go to the dogs, go learn something from the dogs, go learn from them. That's the sentiment of the Maharal. The last thing is an interesting thing. This is a Gemara in Beya. Reish Lakish says, Gimel Azinhein, there are 3 things which have audacity. Yisrael b'umas, amongst all Goyim, the Yidden, have a certain strength. Kelev b'chayis, amongst the wild animals, it's the dog. Amongst the birds, it's the chicken. And some say af eiz b'behema daka, by small animals, it's the goat. And some say the tree, the most chutzpahdik of the trees. Tzlaf is a caper bush. Why is that? Because some say that it gives off fruit the entire year, so it's a positive strength. It's not nispol from the season, not affected by the season. But what does it mean? Now, this idea that the dogs have so much chutzpah, it's a pasuk in Yeshaya. We saw in number 12. The pasuk says, "Haklovim ma'azei nefesh." What does that mean? So to share you one idea, you might not want to hear this, but it's an interesting idea. Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner was a big Litvische Chassidische, a mixed Chassidische Gadol in the 1900s, Yitzchak Hutner. He actually knew the Rebbe from Berlin. Later, he was in Brooklyn for most of his life, and he had to do with the Rebbe. Actually, in 1970, it was a well-known story, before my times, but Rabbi Hutner and his family were on a plane between Eretz Yisrael and New York. They were hijacked. I think his wife and kids were let off in Cyprus. No. He was in Jordan. It was in Jordan. And the Rebbe spoke about it by Fabrengen on Shabbos. And the Rebbe said the following. Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner was known to koch in the Maharal's Sforim. He wrote the Pachad Yitzchak. That's his stuff, Pachad Yitzchak. It's a great Sforim. He loved the Maharal's Sforim, the philosophy. He was big into that. And the Rebbe mentioned by the Fabrengen that it's known that the Maharal was melumad b'nisim, accustomed to miracles. By the Maharal, there was the miraculous transpired everywhere around him. And the Rebbe said, there's a Yid who kochs, he's involved in the Maharal's Sforim, and he needs a miracle. So the fact that he's so engrossed in the Maharal's works, and the Maharal is a man of miracles, the Maharal's merit should stand in his stead. That's what the Rebbe said openly by Fabrengen. And shortly after that, he was released. And people said, if you look at the timing, it's like perfect. The release happened. Is that the Rebbe said that? But the fact is, the Rebbe said that by Fabrengen. So this Rabbi Hutner says the following. What's the chutzpah of the dogs that the Pasuk in Yeshaya is talking about? Or the Gemara in number 15 that says dogs are what's the chutzpah that dogs have more than other animals? She says, no other animal tries to befriend man and feel that they're on par with man. When dogs really cuddle up, they get very close, right? And they become part of the family, they mamish, and the dog can reach a point where they feel, he actually writes, man's best friend. Dogs are man's best friend. But the problem is the dogs sometimes forget that they're a friend. They think they're mamish on par. They're mamish another person of the family. She says that's the chutzpah. The chutzpah is that you don't have to stay. The chutzpah is that the dog just doesn't realize the difference. Right. The difference between the animal kingdom. It's nothing derogatory. It's that the division between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom, the dog can forget.
It's because no, it's a pack animal, and there's a hierarchy, and dogs respect the hierarchy. So, you, as the head of the household, is very easily recognized by the pet. Especially if you raise them from the early
but
on.
you're part of the same pack.
That you're the boss.
Right.
Now,
because one dog has to be the boss.
Wait a minute.
Still your partner.
The problem comes in with certain species of dogs that don't do well with small size children. So because it's a pack animal, there's a hierarchy. So the dog considers himself immediately right after you and your spouse. Now, if your kids are big, you have zero issues because they respect size.
So you're backing up our
Right.
Well, I'm not.
Although,
I'm
listen,
not
hold on,
saying
let me
it.
finish the theory now.
No teeth in dogs.
So he says, the reason why the Gemara and the Pasuk in Yeshaya links chutzpah to a dog is because from all the other animals, you don't have this phenomenon where the animal literally feels that it's part of the family. Mama's part of the family. So he says...
Some people say pigs do that.
So he's... Okay.
That might be why it's called a pig.
So he says like this, you know what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Paro? Moshe is telling Paro that dogs bark in Egypt all the time. Because in Egypt, the difference between the animal kingdom and the human race is not very clear. So the dogs are barking, they really make lots of noise, they feel part of the company. Moshe says, you know what happens when we leave? We're not just leaving Egypt. We're going somewhere. We're going somewhere great. We're about to become a nation. We're about to become the Jewish nation. It's not just about leaving slavery. He's telling about, it's not just about leaving your clutches. We're going on to something you can't even imagine. We are no longer going to be part of the human race. We're going to be beyond. We're going to be Yidden. The dogs aren't going to bark. In other words, as long as when the human race itself, the dog Lav Davka sees a difference, animal kingdom, it's part of the family. But Moshe says even the dogs are going to realize that something else is happening over here. These aren't human beings. This is a different stratosphere
They're not
completely.
my equal.
Yeah. Even the dogs are going to
We're not
understand.
their equals anymore.
Even the dogs are going to understand. That's what he was telling Paroi. You know where we're going? The transformation we're going to be going through at the foot of Har Sinai is going to be so incredible. Even the dogs are going to feel it. Even the dogs are going to sense it. And that's the take of Rabbi Hutner on the thing. Okay, here's a bit of the fact is, Yankelvin had 1 million dogs. Every Jew leaving Egypt had a dog. And
And our sisters taught us when we were little
look,
kids,
the
don't be
the
scared
fact
of
is,
dogs
the dogs.
and say, "Lo yachatz kala b'shayne," they'll be quiet to you.
I convinced.
You know that,
You
right?
know, there's a
And
story.
then I when we were young, much